That's the one. The one, like, you know, when you buy a house, they give you your hazard maps and
Yes.
everything. That was the one thing that we were in. And it was like we kind of had to make a compromise of being in somewhere. Like,
Yeah.
we couldn't afford
Everywhere
it.
has,
Everywhere
like,
somewhere.
a-
Yeah.
Problem. Other
Everywhere's
than
got
maybe
something.
like if you're in the flat zones of, like in the valley.
Sure. Or like deep west side, like beautiful. Like,
Well, no, because Palisades.
Palisades.
Oh,
I
you
was
know what I
thinking
mean?
more like the basin west side, like say like lower Santa Monica. or
Oh,
something.
right, yeah, like
I'm not.
Culver City or
Culver
something
City
like
or
that.
something like that.
Yeah,
But
right.
I can't afford Culver City.
Yeah,
That's nowhere near.
yeah. The day is long past.
Yeah, exactly. Like maybe if I were this version of me 20 years ago, I could have afforded Culver City and like had a great foresight of what Culver City would be.
Exactly. Exactly.
But honestly, then I would have bought in Silver Lake.
Yeah. I mean, you could have bought anywhere and made a killing. If
Oh,
you
absolutely.
would have, hindsight.
But yeah, no, Eagle Rock is raining a lot. It kind of calmed down right around when I left and then picked way up on my drive, but I was also changing. I don't know if it was me changing geography or if the storm was moving in. I was like, I think I was like going into the
You
rain.
mean this morning?
This morning when I, like just
Or on
just
the way
now when I
here
was
now?
coming over. Yeah.
Yeah, it's been, since last night, it was definitely really heavy and then really not. And then
Yeah.
really heavy and then really not. So
It was around maybe like 10 this morning. It was really,
yeah.
really hard. But yeah, then it kind of chilled out a little bit when I was leaving.
Yeah. I think through tomorrow it's supposed to be like this. Oh,
Yeah.
I think these are on.
Oh, are they on?
This one is.
Yes, they're on.
Yeah, you want to turn it off so we save the battery. Okay, so testing. Hi, everybody. So super excited to see you all here. I am Lisa Saw Manning. I am a co-conspirator with Leslie Payne, who put this together, who most of you, probably everybody here knows. Leslie is the force of nature in herself. And I think you want to go ahead and get started. It got quiet, so I just thought I would use the pause to say hi. And I know it.
Give us just a few more minutes. I think there's some folks parking. Let me make sure my mic isn't working.
You turned them off.
Oh, yeah.
Yours is on. Mine's on.
Hello, can everyone hear me? 1 second. Hey, Abby.
Yep.
Yes. Okay. So if anyone needs information on the link for the webcast, I know that's not the right term, but I'm not the most technically inclined. If you type in Woodland Hills Community Church in either YouTube or Facebook, correct, Wayne? You'll automatically see the link for the live stream. That's what it is. So if anyone wants to text that information to people, that would be great. And then I think we can, let me just pull up our agenda. I think we can go ahead and get started. It depends on how many people are parking. 1 second. Okay, 1 second. Oh, hey Dave, did you see a lot of people parking out there, or does it look as though?
Ready to go.
Awesome. Okay, folks, we're gonna get started. Wayne, so are we good to go? Like, it's streaming, we're great. Okay, I'm short, so this microphone, the stand is like right in. Hi, everyone. How's it going? Lots of familiar faces. So thanks for joining today. This is meant to be a very casual event. So we have planned out what it is we'd like to discuss with everyone, and we've talked about how we hope the conversation is going to go. And I think the main thing we're going to do up front right now is try to explain, why it is we thought this would be a useful event, so why we're here. We'll give you a bit of background on who we are. And then the main part of this is to really allow everyone to discuss questions you have or best practices, advice you want to share, and to help facilitate that conversation. So do I need to keep holding this button in order to talk?
I don't think so.
Once it's on, it's on. Okay, everyone can hear me? Great, all right, thanks, Wayne. So really quick again, my name is Leslie Payne, and then Jay, I always mispronounce Jay's last name.
Bologna like lasagna.
Bologna like lasagna, that sounds great. And then Lisa, you introduced yourself before, right?
Yeah,
okay, great. All right, thanks everyone. So people are still trickling in, that's fine. Okay, so why are we here? Why do this today? Quite simply, when the fires started not too long ago, and we know that there are still ongoing, some of them. Are we at 100% containment now, Jay?
No, neither of the two big ones are 100% containment yet. And then they'll still go for a while before they're controlled, and then there's a third stage called out. So those will be active incidents with people on them for a number of weeks still.
Got it, okay. So when the fires first started, though, there were several text chains that were active in our community. And what I mean by our community, where some of us live, so I'm still only 3 years new to Woodland Hills. So south of Dumetz is towards Mulholland, correct? And in that particular community, I know there were at least 3 chains. There probably were many more. I was on 2 of them. And I think each one had roughly, upwards of 15 or more, 20 or more people on them. And they were extraordinarily helpful. And then as, day 1, day 2, day 3 transpired, I realized just how helpful these chains were. And really, in my estimation, there were 2 main, I think, mechanisms that allowed all of us to stay in the loop and to not be as fearful as perhaps we might have been. One was the Watch Duty app, which I heard, isn't there like a TED Talks or something with the creator of the Watch Duty app? There's some interview he gave recently where you can hear about this individual. It was that app, and it was really our text chains that I think really helped me, I'll speak for myself, not be as fearful as we could have been. And through the text chains, though, you really saw community members help one another out. And I'm gonna call some of you out in a minute because you're here today and a lot of you helped the text chains be what they are. And And then I started thinking, as useful as the text chains are, and we're getting this information, through through these devices, our phones, what would be even more useful would be to talk about these ideas we were sharing via the text chains in person. And so I first brought this idea to Jane and Abby, both of whom, can you raise your hands? Amazing neighbors. I'll get into how amazing their husbands are too, because what they did. And then I also ran the idea by Lisa, Sal Manning. We all brainstormed, and we thought, why not try to bring folks together?
Wait,
So
do you want to give a little background on who you are?
I am in a second.
Okay, you're
That's
into it. Okay,
yeah.
all right.
do-
Just wanna make sure.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
you know.
That's okay. So that's how we got started. But if you got a paper flyer in your mailbox, then you'll see that attached to that flyer was an article from the LA Times the other week about why it is community bonds, or how it is community bonds build resilience. And that's another reason why we're here. Because a lot of folks will assert, many academics, social scientists and whatnot, that it's the community partnering together, and it's all of us harnessing the community that can really help us be resilient in the face of a natural disaster. So really quick, before we get into bios, I want to call some folks out for how helpful they've been for keeping us in the loop. Abby and Chris, who live literally right off of Dirt Mulholland. Chris, who every day, multiple times a day, walked up to Dirt Mulholland to speak with LAFD and police officers about activity. Very, very helpful. Adelaide, who walked around the neighborhood and passed out a lot of these flyers, thank you. And of course, Jane and Megan, and I'm leaving a lot of folks out. But that right there is an example of the community coming together. So I'll pause, and then we can kind of give short bios on who we are. That might be a little helpful. First of all, any questions before we continue? Okay. The bio stuff is always kind of awkward, but I'll start. So I guess one of the things that the three of us have in common is we all work together at RAND, the RAND Corporation, which is a research and analysis think tank in Santa Monica. Lisa has been at RAND the longest of all of us. How long has it been, Lisa? Like 15 years?
15 years.
It's been 13 for me, and you were there for many years before I got there. Lisa and I are both political scientists there. Jay is a PhD student who's about to wrap up his PhD work very
Knock
soon.
on whatever's wood that's close.
Knock on
with
wood.
The wrapping up part, but yeah.
Yeah. But the three of us kind of focused on different things with our research, but one of the many topics all of us that are passionate about is disaster management and resilience. And so I think the first project we all worked together on was the Puerto Rico recovery project after Hurricane Maria, correct? Lisa was on the ground talking to residents in Puerto Rico, collecting data. Jay did 1,000,001 awesome things with that project, and I'll let him speak to that if he so chooses when he goes. But that is something that is very near and dear to our heart, and so this particular disaster and tragedy has resonated well with us. I'll say personally, the first time in my life where I saw community togetherness in action was, not to date myself, but 9/11. I was a graduate student in New York on that day, and obviously we all know what happened then, but that's when I saw how helpful it can be when people share communication, share information, and communicate and support one another. And there were other things I intended to say, but I'm going to save them because we already started a few minutes late. But I will offer this one thing about my background. I do a lot of research for FEMA, a lot of FEMA work as of late. And Lisa and I have also done, and I currently do, a lot of military wargaming. And there are some parallels here, because one of the things the military tries to do quite often is strategize and plan for events that might come to pass. And the reason you do that is to make sure that you have the resources and the wherewithal and the personnel, you name it, organized in case a certain disaster or situation comes to pass. And I think in a way that's what we're doing here today, is we're talking about what recently happened. We're going to hypothesize about what might happen in the future, and we're going to make sure that we are as organized as possible so that if these things do happen, God forbid, knock on wood, we can be as resilient as possible. So let me let me stop there about my background and hand it over to Jay.
Yeah, sure. So thank you for letting, oh my gosh, how does this go here? There we go. For letting me be part of this. My name is Jay Bologna, as was said, and I'm actually not a resident of the neighborhood. I live in Eagle Rock, so thank you all for letting me kind of come and be part of this meeting with you all, and I hope I can be useful. And yeah, to give a little bit of background about me, I'm a PhD candidate and an assistant policy researcher at RAND, where I studied disaster risk management with Leslie and Lisa. But they're both more experienced than me, so why did they ask me, a relatively junior member of the organization, to come? And that's because I'm a wildfire expert specifically. I research all kinds of disasters, and I like to say that I research the ways that there's no such thing as a natural disaster, that disasters are our community's failure to meet those moments. But if you leave me in a room long enough, I'm gonna talk about wildfire specifically. That's because I'm from the West, I'm from the Great Basin, and my first real job out of high school was as a firefighter. 2 days after high school graduation, I was at firefighter boot camp and spent most of my 20s working as an engine and hell attack firefighter for the federal government. Left that job mostly because I wanted to move to a city, moved to Los Angeles and worked on an ambulance here for a while before going back to school, finishing up a degree, going back to school some more, finishing up another degree, and then continuing on with school, I guess now forever. But yeah, so this experience with wildfires is why I'm here and why I want to help this neighborhood, this community kind of help talk through what you all just experienced and what are ways that you can try to cut through some of that fear that you probably experienced and be a little bit more ready on the back end of this for the next time that it's going to happen, because we live in a place where wildfire is going to be part of our lives. If you're not originally from here, it's part of the West, it's part of a place like Los Angeles, and it's always going to be. There's not going to be any way to erase fire from the landscape, and in fact, part of the reason that we're in this situation is because for 150 years we tried to erase fire from the landscape, and that didn't go so well. So it's important to try to live with these things and live with them in ways that don't cause disaster, that just make them perhaps an inconvenience in our lives, but something that we can live alongside and live with. I think that's probably a pretty good intro. I guess I'll just kind of shut up and get out of the way and let Lisa introduce herself and get things moving.
Okay, and I'm also a political science brand, and I do a lot of community resilience work in conflict zones as well, as like post Hurricane Maria. And mostly I'm just here because I want to know our neighborhood and our community and see ways that a lot of the work we do are like in developing countries and conflict zones, and I think there are a lot of things that we can learn even from places like that got so much less than we do. But in many ways they're a lot richer, or maybe not a lot richer, but they're richer in the way that their communities come together because that's all that they have, and I feel like we can leverage that in more ways than we probably already do. I've lived here for 5 years and I see maybe 2 people I know, and one of them's my husband. So I want to know you guys, and I think there are opportunities for us to learn from each other. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you all have to say more than what I have to say.
Awesome. Thanks, Lisa and Jay. So lots of experience here, folks. So please, pick their brains, our brains, and that'll be good. Hopefully, and by the way, there are lots of kids here. Great. If it gets wild with the kids, that's okay, right? Right, little Lawrence? It's okay. So because the playground, I guess, is raining, so I'm not sure if they can go outside. All right, so what are we going to do today? So let me just quickly kind of run down what we've talked about and let us know if you have any questions. I think the main point, there are 2 main objectives, I think, for today. First and foremost, we want to make sure that we capture everyone's ideas and the best practices that we discuss in a way that's going to be helpful to all of you, to all of the community. And that might be after we're done. So this is being recorded. I'm not a tech person, but because we're streaming it, I think Wayne said we are recording it. After this is over, I'll go through everything and put all of our notes or all of the best practices discussed in like a list or a spreadsheet, whatever we think is most useful, and then we'll make sure it's disseminated. So before you leave, if you'd like to receive the notes, the main outcome from today, please see Jane, and Jane is right there. Jane, can you stand up? Lovely Jane, who does so much for this community. She has that list, and she'll be in the back with the pizza, again, which is coming at 2:30. And then the second, I think, objective is, and this might seem a lesser important one, but actually in my mind is right up there, is for us to get to know each other in this room. So we don't have name tags, we're not gonna, pass the mic around and, give. But What we can do at the end, if everyone is comfortable, is we can make a list of what I'm calling community competencies. And that's the list that contains not only our names, but like some of the things that we might be good at, that you might think the next person, might not consider vital, but during the next tragedy might be essential. For example, Jason, my neighbor, is like, you work with like metal and wood. He's an artist, but he builds great things. I mean, Jason, your skill set might be vital. Raise your hand, Jason. Your skill set might be vital, and you might not even realize that. And if someone, for example, is a veterinarian, an MD, an electrician, a cinematographer, who knows, a retired physician, Adelaide, it would be good to have an idea of what skill sets and help is available should we need to call on each other in the future. So with that, there's kind of some rules of the road we talked about that we want to relay. Again, this is casual, not formal, but we think in order for the conversation to really be as fruitful as it can be, I know this goes without saying, but we want to keep it civil, but everyone is like a highly nice and civilized person anyway. I mean, I know most of you in here, it's fine. But we need to say that, okay? So Sebastian, don't stand up and get crazy. Just joking, you would never do that, Sebastian. You're a peacenik. I'm just saying. I had to throw a joke in there. But let's keep it civil. And then, as much as I'd love to talk politics, because we're political scientists, right, Lisa? We're going to keep it politics free, which is hard. But if I can do it, you can do it. Okay. So we're going to do that. And then lastly, no judgment. So we're going to ask questions. I'll use myself when we start that as a guinea pig, and I'll ask the first question. And you might wonder how it is I don't know this, but I don't. And so I think if we're candid, if we're vulnerable about what we do or don't know, the conversation is really going to be useful. So I think that's it. So we're going to get started with the meat.
Can I jump in with one other real request for folks too? Since I'm not a member of this community and don't know any of you, when you get up to ask a question and when we're starting to chat back and forth, if you could just tell me your name so I know who I'm talking to, I would appreciate that.
That's great, Jay. Yeah, and so everyone can also know. And by the way, when you do ask your question, Lisa is going to be awesome. She'll be the mic runner. So she'll run the mic to you. You don't have to come up here. There are some people that might want to come up and talk a little bit more extensively about certain things, like our neighbor Danny, he'll do so. But yes, Lisa will come to you.
And the mic's important for the recording as well. So even if you think you got a good voice and you don't need it, people can't hear you through the internet without it.
Okay, all right. Let's get started with the meat and potatoes, right, Jay? Okay. So one of the things we thought would be interesting, and we're not sure how well versed all of us are about what is called the hazard cycle or the disaster management life cycle. Is that the correct term, Jay? And what this is, and then Wayne, if you can put the slide up. So what we thought would be useful is to kind of explain to you how people who work within disaster management, how they think about or conceptualize the chain of steps that occur that help people plan for, take care of in the process, and then recover from disasters. So I'm going to turn it over to Jay, and I know the font is kind of small on the slide.
I'll walk you through it. You don't need the font. Don't worry about it.
Okay, Jay,
okay, so this question was obviously astroturfed in there for a reason, and it's so that we can kind of structure the conversation around the different quadrants of how we theoretically think of disasters, and that might sound a little heady and navel-gazy, and likewise as academic talking to me about the theory of disasters. It's important for kind of how this work gets done, both the work that you all are going to be doing and the work that the responders in this city have been doing for the last couple of weeks, right? So when we think about disaster, and this is sort of a little bit of an outdated model, but it's really useful for explaining to people who don't think about this stuff every day. You can think about things in a circle, and the circle begins with any kind of event, right? Something that happened, that failure of our society's moment, or our society to meet the moment of a hazard and disaster. Where can I stand to make this not happen? Sorry. Then we have the response element, which is what we've been observing the last couple of weeks, right? Where people under flashing lights and sirens show up, try to put the fire out, try to help pull people out of the earthquake rubble, try to beat back the flooding and pump the water out, whatever the event called for, you have this response element, right? Following that, reasonably and probably well known, you have the recovery element, where people start trying to rebuild and build their lives back up. Communities try to get things back together in order, oftentimes the way they were before, sometimes in a new, better way, but there's this reemergence from that event that we call recovery. Then we re-enter back into sort of the long-term element of this cycle, and many of these things happen periodically, right? Earthquakes happen in this area every 100-something years. Geological time happens on scales that I don't always understand, but they're regular occurrences, right? And after an earthquake, we know that another one's going to come. So we do things to start trying to mitigate the next event, right? Those are things like building codes. Those are things like vegetation management in the case of a wildfire. Those are things like levees or channelizing rivers in the case of flooding. That's the mitigation element of this cycle. And then we move into something that gets a little bit closer to the event itself, and this is the preparedness or preparation segment of the cycle. And this is the sort of things that you might have been reading about with LAFD's strategy of pre-positioning resources, or everyone having an evacuation plan and a go bag, and these sorts of things. These are the elements of mitigation that are focused on the immediate before time, sorry, forgot my words there, the time immediately before the actual onset of a hazard event, right? And then you've got a hazard event that happens again, and hopefully you've built this cycle in a way that doesn't repeat the cycle. You don't have a disaster, you just have a hazard event, which is why some disaster theoreticians are beginning to conceptualize this more as a spiral, something with some sort of third dimension that doesn't imply that you re-enter this circle. However, we oftentimes do re-enter this circle. Oftentimes a hazard event exceeds our ability to plan and prepare for it, or at least the planning and preparation that we have done. And it ends up being a disaster again, and we're forced back into that cycle of response, recovery, mitigation, and preparedness. That's the way that we think about things theoretically, and as I was kind of pointing out with my examples there, that's the way that our governments, Western governments since the Great Lisbon earthquake of the 1700s, have kind of structured response or government action toward these sorts of things, right? And not just government action, but community action of all types. Even if you don't use these words, even if you don't think about these things, the actions that you're taking around any kind of hazard event fit into one of these four quadrants. So it might seem silly to think about and kind of irrelevant for your purposes, but I think it's useful for us structuring this conversation. And if you're trying to get yourselves more organized and your neighborhood more planned out and ready, then it's useful to think about where your actions fit to make sure that you're covering all four of these quadrants with planning, with readiness. Because without adequate action in all four of these quadrants, you risk re-entering that circle the next time something happens and forcing yourself back into that cycle.
Thanks, Jay. And can I also add, I think some simultaneity is possible here. So we are in technically both the response and the recovery phase right now.
There is simultaneity of all the segments of this cycle. Recovery begins immediately upon hazard onset. People who lost their homes, if anyone is in this room who's lost their home, I'm sure you know this. If not, that's what we're here to talk about getting ready for. But God forbid, in the event that it does happen, you begin calling an insurance company right away, right? You start your recovery journal, you start talking to FEMA. These things happen oftentimes before you're even allowed back into your own neighborhood. The response is still happening, the recovery's already begun. We're already starting to talk about ways in this city that we plan to prepare for and mitigate the next wildfire that will come. That stuff's overlapping with, like I said, the response that is going to be ongoing through February at the earliest. So yeah, all segments of this happen simultaneously. Response and recovery are sort of well known for happening simultaneously. Right. But yeah.
Yeah, so I think another great takeaway is what we're going to do today is key for the mitigation and the preparation, I think, part of it, but we're also still recovering, and we still have, some of us, strong emotions about the fires, so it's okay that these things are happening at the same time. Something else I wanted Jay to do, and hi Marley, come on in. I think that's Marley. And Jay, maybe we can spend a few minutes on this, but I think it's really important, is clarify for us. I know I still sometimes am murky on this, despite the fact this is like my bailiwick, Iran, is to understand how all these different forces who kind of make this cycle go, how they intersect. So we know what FEMA is and does, I think. Some people may not, and that's okay, but we have people at the state level. We have people at the city level, what we call the local level. The acronym we use for that is we didn't coin the acronym, is SLTT, state, local, tribal, territorial. And then you have the federal actors. So Jay, if you can just really quickly, in a very straightforward way, how do these different actors or entities come together in disaster response?
Yeah, absolutely. So the sort of Western system, Western Europe and North America have sort of structured in a way where those SLTT actors are the predominant forces for all segments of this cycle. We think of FEMA as being big and important, and FEMA is big and important, but it's really a backstop behind the core system here, which is our state and local responders, planning agencies, authorities, elected officials. So when you think about who's really responsible for the response and recovery, you're looking to LAFD, LA County FD, the state and county governments, Cal OES, the Office of Emergency Services, which has essentially a big tactical command center in Sacramento that's been buzzing like crazy the last couple of weeks, making sure resources get down here in a timely fashion. And then as the backstop, both predominantly financially, but also to a certain extent manpower-wise, especially when that recovery element comes across and you need a lot of people doing accounting and paperwork and that kind of thing, you've got FEMA, and you've got other federal entities that operate with FEMA, like Housing and Urban Development, Commerce, and other sections of the federal government that operate as sort of a backstop. They also operate as the scientific knowledge agencies. They're the predominant weather predictors and things like that, but even that weather prediction system has a local component that operates predominantly, or that operates relatively autonomously. You saw that with the weather alerts. The red flag warnings that we were all getting were coming from the Ventura and Los Angeles offices of the National Weather Service. A big federally funded system, but those are our friends, local, and neighbors who work as meteorologists in those offices. And then you've got a volunteer element as well. And this is to bring up acronyms that we use professionally. Those are your VOADs, your volunteer organizations active in disaster. And that's elements like the Red Cross, Lutheran Relief Services, Team Rubicon, entities of varying degrees of formality and organization that are made up of volunteers that come in at all sections of this hazard cycle and try to help. So kind of an all-of-society response to this issue, maybe not as large and important as people who study it like us would want it to be, but it does touch on kind of all levels of government and non-government as well.
Lisa, go ahead, yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say we already have a comment or a question in the audience.
Great.
If we could.
Oh, yeah, Lisa, do you want to?
to?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Walk
Great,
over here.
Hi, my name is Nilu, and my question is, since you have connections to FEMA and you understand, what FEMA pays for whatever, does FEMA actually pay for prevention of disaster?
Yes, it does. Not uniformly, but they do so through a grant-making system. There are a great deal of preparedness and mitigation grants that our communities and states go after. Los Angeles County in California all have gotten a number of these grants that directly pay for preparedness, prevention, and mitigation with federal resources, yeah.
Because we know that, our neighborhood is kind of in like a disaster, close to the disaster area for fire. So we designed a sprinkler system on top of a roof. Mm-hmm. It does prevent from fire coming to a roof, of course, the ambers. But also there are other issues that, we talked about it, that if the wind is like really hard, the water is gonna just scatter around. But if the whole neighborhood has this sprinkler system, we can kind of like create rain for the whole neighborhood. Like if you come to my backyard right now, we turn it on, it looks like rain coming down on our house.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Wow, that got louder. Sprinkler. I'm sure we're going to talk about.
My question is why FEMA doesn't let people to have the sprinkler or like help them with, to put on those sprinklers around?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess it's just sort of a quirk of American governance is that we ascribe a great deal of personal responsibility to people's personal property. And the government routinely does not help you build anything in your house. It requires homeowners and property owners to pay for that kind of stuff. When I'm talking about the government efforts for preparedness and mitigation, I mean, that's things like building fire stations, that's things like clearing vegetation on public lands, that's things like preparing government systems like fire departments. So I think there's a lot of pathways to doing that kind of stuff.
They can actually, I don't know how it's going to work out, but like whoever needs the money to put on those sprinklers, FEMA can help for prevention.
Hopefully, I mean, they're bound from doing so by law at the moment in many cases. There's a thing called the Stafford Act that dictates what FEMA's allowed to do. And in most cases, FEMA's bound to, when helping someone rebuild, providing support that allows them to rebuild to pre-disaster conditions. So they're not really allowed to make improvements in many ways because of just congressional action. And not, we're trying to keep politics out of it. There are just straight laws that prevent FEMA from doing some of that. And until those laws are changed.
But, they can give that incentive to the homeowners, for like insurances, they can pay lower for insurance if they put on these sprinklers.
That would be a great thing for them to do in the future. I hope that FEMA has the opportunity to do that. But they're not able to now.
Yeah, can I just say, just to foot stomp that, there is literally, I think, a laundry list of what FEMA can and does do in each of these phases of the cycle. But I think if I were to put on my FEMA hat, so if I were to pretend like to be a FEMA employee right now, my guess is there are some, though, activities or actions that FEMA would suggest falls at the foot of the homeowner and is beyond their area of responsibility. And I don't have a list for you on what those items are, but we do have a community spreadsheet that's in circulation right now. And in fact, I think, if it's okay with you, Jay, can we pivot to talking about, so one of the things I wanted to do today was Jay has written a series of very helpful op-ed pieces for the LA Times, and I wanted him to talk through two of them and kind of give his top takeaways. But I'm looking at the clock, and I think maybe we should pivot to talking about the spreadsheet and the items on it, and then come back a little bit later if we have time to your two pieces. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. But I want to plug them, not just because Jay is my colleague and my friend, but because they're really good, well-written, straightforward opinion pieces that can leave anyone that reads them more informed afterwards compared to before. At least that's how I felt when I came across them. So I definitely want you to speak to them. But I'm sorry, would you mind telling me your name again? Neela? Nilu. Nilu, I'm going to make sure you have the link to the spreadsheet. And for everyone who might not be aware about there is a community spreadsheet. And that spreadsheet will guide our conversation right now. But that spreadsheet is broken out into 3 different sheets or segments. The first is a way for us to recommend to one another what you might want to buy, like purchase, to be more prepared in the future. That second tab, and then Jay's going to lead the discussion on that second tab. The second tab relates to what you can buy, what you can do, like actions you can take. And I think what you're mentioning should be on that list. The third tab is about questions you might have in general. But if you and I can exchange information afterwards, I don't mind trying to get you a more concrete, definitive answer to your question about what exactly FEMA can and cannot do to for individual homeowners regarding your property. Insurance drops people? Yeah, my insurance dropped me 5 days ago for no apparent reason. Sorry, I had to throw that out there. They did. Some people know that,
I thought
for no reason.
FEMA can actually help people to prevent a disaster.
I don't know if they can.
Instead of pay them after disaster. The prevention is going to cost less for FEMA.
Yes. So there's so much nuance here. FEMA has a big budget, it's a fixed budget, and I'm not sure, Jay, how FEMA's budget is allocated, and even if
But
we did.
they all have to work together, you know,
We do.
FEMA and, fire.
So, okay, full disclosure, we have what we did is, my wife said, we set up the sprinkler system on a roof. We do have a business that we've established specifically, and you can go to the website, afpsos.com. If you want to, you can input information. It's not really live yet, but, you know, what our thinking is, if you have a community that, okay, you have one house that has a sprinkler system on top of it, as we see in all these disasters, it's a very sad thing going back and see you're the only house in the whole neighborhood. So it has to be a community approach. So, and the vision is if a fire starts approaching, they're all connected, they all turn on in front of the fire, and it at least, well, nothing's going to stop a wildfire, as we know, but it will kill, or will not allow the embers to catch fire and to get under your eaves. And there's a lot of different things that could be done to connect systems in front of a fire that'll just douse it with water.
I would say even if FEMA can't do that, you have your neighbors here, and if people are interested in doing something like that, then we can work together with what we've got as individual homeowners.
And can I also plug on the spreadsheet, next to the column where you make a recommendation on what someone should do or buy, is a column for cost.
Ooh,
Because the other realistic part of this is that every recommendation that we might have has a price tag, and everyone has different capabilities. And I know for me personally, it helps to know what those price tags are for all the things, my wish list of all the things I want to buy and do. And that's why when we built the spreadsheet, we were like, we must have columns for expected, cost of these things. Sorry, yeah.
Gonna move on?
For some practical advice on some of the stuff.
Put up there
Mike,
so
If I may, for those of you who may know me or don't know me, I'm Johnny Walker. I'm president of the Woodland Hills Homeowners Organization. We're a political activist group, and Heath is here with me as well. He's on the neighborhood council. I'm a trial lawyer. I handled a lot of the claims are over in the Woolsey fire case over there. So some of the practical things we learned from that you may not really know or understand. There's really, as we look at the great organization, there's really two different types of people, those that have insurance and those that don't. The other side of that is those that are going to stay and those that are going to leave. Those that don't have any insurance, FEMA is going to be your only way out. They will offer you $500,000 to rebuild your home at 4% interest, deferred for the first year. By the way, the cost right now to rebuild homes, first price is about $700 per square foot. You do the math as to whether or not you can rebuild your home, what they're going to give you at that stage. If you have insurance on your claims, FEMA is not your source of where you're going to go to. You got to go to your homeowner's insurance first before you're going to go to FEMA. Watch the stuff that's going on with any of your friends or neighbors that are going through this. If you put up a GoFundMe page for people to help you out, and then you make a claim to FEMA without disclosing that may be fraud to a FEMA. You have to let them know, because FEMA is only going to pay you for extra stuff that you're not getting in from other sources.
FEMA can't duplicate money that's been paid
That's correct.
elsewhere. Yeah.
Yeah. So just be aware that you have to make sure that you're going to. It may be geared for something specific. That would be in addition to it. But just watch that issue. That's going to be something that you're going to find out coming up shortly. The other thing is as to what you need to be looking at. By the way, I put up an article on our website, whho.com. Go take a look at it. It has a lot of things like the first three apps that you must have on your phones to be able to watch what's going on. Be aware your phones are not going to work if you get in a disaster. I don't care if it's earthquake or fires. They're not going to work the way that you think that they are. Your televisions are not going to work. You're going to need to have a battery-operated radio to take with you so you can find out what the heck is going on someplace. If you are going to be evacuating, you need to know when you're going to evacuate. I don't care if you're staying or you're going to leave. You have to know when you're going to evacuate, when's the time to say, I'm done, I'm going, and then what your evacuation routes are going to be. Talking to the fire captain up here, if they were to fight fires up here in the valley, I live up at the top of Mulholland, basically. If they're to fight it, they're going to come in their trucks up there, and they're going to move north. So if you're trying to evacuate going north to try to get up to Mulholland to get out, you're going to run into problems because the fire trucks are going to be up there. So you need to plan out alternate routes of where you need to be going to. We lost a lot of people up in the Oakland fires, you may know, a long time ago, because people got stuck in their cars. And they thought by the way of rolling up the windows in the car, they'd be safe with the fires coming over the top of them. Doesn't work. They were baked inside of those cars, and we lost a lot of people in that. You have to also understand that I learned from a fellow who actually stayed during the fires and got burnt one back in '72 and also lost a lot of property up there. When the fire comes through, it takes all the oxygen away from you. There is nothing to breathe when that fire comes through. In that kind of an inferno, you cannot breathe. So, oh, well, I'll just kind of hunker down at that particular time. It's gone. If you're going to get a go bag, you may want to get some of these little oxygen tanks that they have now for like $10 or what have you. If you're going to walk out, you have to run out, you're going to be exhausted at that point in time. You may be looking for that in your go bag. Start looking at things of what you would have to do if you really left and what were you going to be doing and getting someplace to make sure what you had to bring with you at that point. So with your house, we have, as I was surprised at, I'm looking up in this area, there's very few fire hydrants around. And I'm going to work with, by the way, we're having the council member, Blumenfield, come to our meeting on this Wednesday night at 7:30, which is going to be done on Zoom. So go over to the website, you can see how to connect into that. But anyway, we're going to talk about the fire stuff and about things that are going on. What I think we should really be doing is having a lot of the able men being trained to be basically neighborhood firemen. Because we can't get enough trucks up here, we can't get enough fire engines up here, can't get enough hoses up here at this point. They'll be doing other stuff. What are you going to do when you're staying? You're going to be trying to get rid of the embers. You're not going to be able to fight a house. If you've got a house that's in full-fledged flames, you can't stop that. The firemen can't even stop that. What they're doing is trying to stop those embers from going over to other places. Be aware, they want a 2-mile radius around the fire. Why? Because that's where the embers go to. If you're staying, that's what you're doing. You're trying to fight those particular embers. But be aware, a lot of things don't work. First of all, and this happened with me, and you don't recognize that, the amount of smoke that you end up having, you cannot see a thing. You've got to have good goggles for that point in time. You may need a gas mask. They're like $30 or what have you. Make sure that you have those things around for you. Go be prepared for this stuff. Come take a listen to us. Take a look at what we're going to do with Bob at that point. Take a look at the article, whho.com, and you'll be able to take a look at what we're doing in the community at that point. Be safe. Be prepared for whether it's earthquake or fires or what have you. Thank you for what you're doing here and for the organization you guys are putting together in this one as well.
Thank you. And can I also pass to you afterwards the link to that spreadsheet, and you can throw some of the good ideas you just mentioned on that spreadsheet?
That was just the beginning. You have no idea the stuff that goes on when you get into these things. Stupid things like your rain gutters, and having leaves that are in them. Guess what the fire and embers love? They love fuel. They come in, they drop into those things, and you got your house is going to get on fire because of what's in your rain gutter. Who would think about getting your rain gutters out?
Right. So regularly cleaning out our rain gutters. I'm going to put that on the list, but if I forget, because I will, sir, please, you do so. But we're gonna.
I know there are a lot of other comments.
Okay,
kind of
yeah.
like around here.
Okay,
so
go ahead. Thanks.
Yeah. Wait, hold on, please, because we want to have this recorded so that people on the streamline can get it.
So it's whoo.com. And then what time is that Zoom?
It'll be 7:30 this Wednesday. Bob Blumenfield, our council member, is going to be on. That's a Zoom. That'll be on a Zoom. And probably in March, we'll probably have the fire captain out so he can talk to us about a lot of stuff. And on February, we're going to have building and safety, a planning department out about what they're doing with some of the planning stuff. You may not know that they want to put in 5-story apartment buildings from Mulholland on Topanga, all the way from Ventura Boulevard, all the way up to Mulholland. So there's a lot of stuff going on with planning that's going to affect our abilities to be safe in the community too. Watch what we're doing.
Really
in the community.
interesting. Thank you. Okay, Abby, Chris, anything else?
Oh,
Okay,
just
so
comment back here.
Okay, got it.
Can I just jump in with one quick comment? If anyone is thinking about trying to get equipment to stay during a fire event and try to help with the firefighting effort, that not be a decision that you take lightly, and that you, in most cases, probably not do that. It's deeply recommended against by the American response community, and those things might change. Our community might begin asking that of folks, but under current response regimes, it's not recommended. It's extraordinarily dangerous for you and for the responders, and sets back the firefighting effort in a deep and substantial way. So just be very, very careful if you make the decision to stay in an evacuation setting to try to help with the firefighting effort. Just do not take that kind of decision lightly, please.
Hi, my name's Jasmine. I have a question that doesn't concern property. It has to do with like life and limb, and I've lost faith in our warning system. Pertinent to what I've heard about what happened with some folks in Altadena not getting warnings, and their houses going down, and the city switching from Genesis to some other system. And I just want to know from the experts, like brass tacks, not policy, pragmatically, like what is going on with our warning system? When can we have any faith in it again, if at all?
Yeah, so brass tacks, what's going on with our warning system is that it's been for decades now under a period of deep and disruptive transition. And we're seeing the struggles that transition entails right now, and we've been seeing them. I'm sure during the unrest during COVID, you all got alerts that talked about curfews beginning at different times and conflicting with each other. A year or two ago, there was something that the Glendale Fire Department sent to the entire county pertaining to a drill, telling everyone in the county to evacuate on a random day. These systems are new, and there's a lot of growing pains with them, and they're new, and we're being forced into this transition because the system we used to use, the emergency broadcast system, has fallen apart because we don't watch broadcast television and listen to FM radio any longer. So, and we've let the Cold War era sirens rust in place and fall into disrepair. So we've lost the ways that we used to alert people via landline telephones, broadcast media, and physical sirens, and the replacements, just as you're pointing out, are just not quite there yet. And some of this is due to just that fact, as a researcher who looks at these sorts of things. When will we be able to have faith in our systems? I think that we still need to try to have faith in them, but we need to recognize that they're not sufficient yet and begin backing them up with things like watch duty is a great example. We need to be making sure that we're turning to those old systems where they exist when we can, in times where we know they might be needed. So if you have the ability to switch on a radio or turn to broadcast television during an event like this, that it could be important to do so, because those still might function the way that they were traditionally meant to, in case the WIA alert doesn't arrive at your phone correctly. But you're pointing out something that's been very concerning to the emergency management community for a couple of decades now, and we haven't got it figured out yet. And I wish I could tell you that we'll have it figured out tomorrow, but we're not going to. It's going to take a little longer. People are working very hard on this problem. They have been for a long time, but it's a really difficult nut to crack. And I know that's not great news. I wish I could tell you that that's a one-time event that's not going to happen again, but I don't know that that's the case. So it's important to supplement those it's important to still turn to those official alerts when they come and expect them to get better and fight for them to get better. But like I said, we need to be backing them up now with the old school ways where we can. Someone brought up a radio earlier. Have a radio. AM, FM radio is absolutely of key importance in this kind of event. News radio, because people will be able to be talking you through things live as they happen. You'll be able to get those alerts in case they don't hit your phone correctly. But yeah, I mean, this is a problem with emergency management in the 21st century in America.
Jake, can I say after you, sir, it's going to be Jim, and then Abby. I know you're Abby and Chris afterwards. And about the radio, I would say what? Battery-powered, battery-operated radio, correct?
Battery-operated with
batteries.
replaceable batteries is good, because if you've got a chargeable one, like how are you going to charge it if your power's out? But the crank radios are the good ones, if you can get one of those crank radios. But your car's got a radio, and if you really need to do it, get in your car and turn on the radio. Congress is looking at a law to maintain AM radios in all cars for a reason, and it's this reason. It's to make sure that we keep that backup system around. Not everyone's got a car. It's kind of problematic to we're relying on cars like that, but you get a radio. Get a radio that's got AA batteries or a crank.
Oh, wait, Jim, and then Alexi, you're going to be after Abby
Hello.
and Chris. Go ahead. Floor is yours.
Hi, my name is Kyle. I live up on Morrow. I think the biggest question that I have about safety is around like vegetation management. I think anyone that lives in this community, right, like we live here because of the canopy of trees that are around us, right?
Yeah.
So like, I've just been trying to reconcile those two things, and I am an engineer as my job, and like, a part of my brain is like, all right, let's just get the saw out, but like, yeah. So if this is what you do, tell me what you.
Some of it is get the saw out, but I mean, we also live in a place that is meant to burn, not meant to, evolution doesn't have a meaning like that. But chaparral is an extremely flammable ecosystem. It burns like crazy. It's basically light, woody shrubs covered in flammable wax. Yeah, it burns like crazy. And then a lot of the invasive species that we've replaced chaparral with, because we like the way they look, burn even more intensely, like eucalyptus. And so, yeah, I mean, some of it needs to be mechanical management. We do need to be doing some saw work, and there's some gardening and some individual efforts that need to happen on our properties and in our communities and in our neighborhoods, and we need to also be demanding that of the land management agencies and the entities like the Park Service and the county open space departments. But we also need to keep in mind that there's no amount of mechanical clearing that's going to totally erase fire from the Southern California landscape, be it chaparral on the coast or the alpine forests in the Angeles closer to where I live. This stuff is going to burn. It's meant to burn. It's always burned. It's going to burn. And we need to live with fire. We can't depend on our ability to completely erase it. But you're right, get the saw is going to be the answer in a lot of cases. And especially in the chaparral ecosystem where prescribed fire is not really a great alternative, getting the saw out is going to be a lot of what government at all levels is going to be doing and has been doing for a long time, but we probably need to be doing more of it.
Like, just like specific homeowner type recommendations is what that.
Yeah, so there are websites and resources that can help you determine that for your property, things like livingwithfire.com, others that are like that, that you can turn to get specific recommendations based on the sorts of plants you have and the type of home construction that you have around how much defensible space you might need. So I would turn to those. I'm not a fire ecologist, I'm not a fire scientist. I mean, those things get a little bit more complicated, but generally...
Livingwithfire.com.
Livingwithfire.com, from my alma mater, University of Nevada. There are others too. I mean, if you just Google this stuff, Living with Fire, defensible sprays recommendations, CAL FIRE's got a ton of these as well. Generally speaking, you don't want vegetation within 5 feet of the physical structure of your home. You want to make sure your roof is either metal or Class A asphalt shingles. I doubt anyone in here has got a shake roof, but if you do, sorry, it looks cool, get rid of it. But those have been pretty long gone in California for a number of years. And then maintaining things to stop ember cast. So if you've got vents into your attic, replace the rodent screen with window screen. Do things like make sure that all the vegetation you do have on your property is well manicured and well watered. Defensible space is also only as good as the weakest link in the neighborhood though too. So if you have neighbors that aren't maintaining defensible space, try to help them do so. Because if your neighbor's house catches fire, there's not much defensible space that you're going to be able to maintain on your property to keep that ember storm from hitting your house. So it's got to be a community-wide effort. And like I said, if you want specific recommendations based on the kinds of plants you have and the kind of yard that you have, there are a lot of places to turn, and I'd love to help you find those. But yeah, a lot of it does have to be us getting the saw out on our own properties too.
Hi, I'm Jim Heimler. Been living in these hills for 38 years. I grew up in Laurel Canyon, so I grew up with the fires and up in the mountains and then backpacked through fires. I'm an architect, an urban planner, I'm an activist, been doing this my whole life. I've been very active in our neighborhood, not as architect, but just in terms of trying to get safety. One of the bigger issues in our streets has been water pressure. When we moved up here, the firemen just said, it will burn. We have no water pressure. I know they added a tank, but I doubt they still have much water pressure. The streets have the bigger issue. When you're doing a house, and it's like you used to do in Malibu, you had to upgrade, to do a house, you had to upgrade the water pressure in the whole neighborhood. So they're now issuing permits without that. They have for a long time. But the bigger thing's the enforcement. Streets are supposed to be so wide if you're doing a house. They're letting dirt fall into the streets, so Morrow's down to almost 1 lane at one point. And I've been talking to them over 2 years. They don't, council office, the city, they just don't care. And they got people parking under no parking signs and red flag days. There's no enforcement. They've now got 5 or 6 different kinds of signs in our neighborhood, all saying don't park one way or another. None of them make any sense. So if you want to drop or stop access in the neighborhood. You can legally do it just by parking where you're allowed to park, and then the fire truck can't get through. Sanitation says they need more space than the firemen need. So now they're starting, like my street, they just put up no parking signs anywhere, and I was told the entire neighborhood's going that route. There will be no street parking. But I've been working almost monthly, probably every 2 weeks, sending out emails to about 14, 15 different departments, including city attorney's office, and so until it's a legal matter, they're not going to do anything. So I have hired an attorney. I don't know if I'm going to hire him, do too much of this. I've worked on sprinklers on buildings and temples, and you can do stuff like that. But again, water pressure's got to be there. If you're having meetings, and I am semi-retired, so I'm not looking for any work, but if you're having meetings and you'd like me there, I've been on the vendor list for almost all the insurance companies for fire. I've worked on all these things. I've worked in the hills on everything on all types of projects, but I'm just right now just trying to help. And I've been putting my name down. I was on FEMA, I guess, for 40 years as a volunteer. They didn't call me once, but I was there for 40 years, took all the classes. But I'm really into this stuff. I'm into protecting our neighborhood. The other thing, one of the neighbors I walk with, people aren't maintaining their trees. So if you've got a palm leaf, don't stick it on the ground. Get rid of it, because that's real bad. And if you stuff it in your neighbor's neighborhood, lot, that's been going on. But we need to lobby the council office, mayor's office to enforce what they've got. Most of it's the enforcement.
Yeah, you brought up something interesting with the water pressure too that I want to just jump in and note as well. I mean, if you look at the actual recommendations from CAL FIRE for what you're supposed to do when you leave your property in a fire event, you're not supposed to leave your sprinklers on. Because it drops water pressure in the neighborhood and has statistically a very low chance of of really helping. Rooftop sprinklers, like what you guys were talking about, is a little bit of a different story. There's a lot of proven good that rooftop sprinklers can do, but most of the time when they're recommended to have their own water source, rain barrels or a pool that you're pumping out of, something like that, so that you're not overdrawing the water system for the entire neighborhood. Especially if the entire neighborhood's got rooftop sprinklers, having dedicated water sources for that kind of thing could be a really important part of investing in that infrastructure if there are folks in this room who are thinking of investing in that kind of infrastructure. Pump out of your own pool, pump out of rain barrels, pump out of gray water systems, something like that, so that the water pressure stays to the extent such a thing can be possible. In the Palisades, the loss of water pressure was pretty complicated and perhaps unavoidable, but yeah, water pressure in major events like this has been a problem. Again, talking about how some of these things are longstanding issues for 100 plus years in the United States. San Francisco invested in an entire secondary firefighting water system after the 1906 earthquake, maybe that 7 earthquake, excuse me, thank you. After the 1907 earthquake, they installed an entire parallel water system that's only used for firefighting. I don't know if that's financially or geographically viable in Los Angeles, but those are the sorts of infrastructure investments it takes to maintain kind of water pressure in a major urban conflagration event like that. We just don't have that kind of water system really in any city except for San Francisco.
1 second. So just, if I can just say one thing about our remaining time left. So we're going to go to Abby and Chris, and then Lexi, and then Mike, and then Michael, and then. But but one of the things I really wanted to do today is I wanted to pass the mic to Danny, who has been engaged in CERT training, community emergency response training, correct? And he was going to share what he's learned to date. But hopefully when the pizza comes, the pizza will come in about 20 or so minutes. Feel free, Wayne, I don't know, are people allowed to eat inside? Probably not. Yeah, okay. So the pizza will come, but the conversation, or is the pizza already there? No, but the conversation can still continue. So maybe we can, in about 20 or so minutes, pause, eat, and then come back. And hopefully most of you will come back, because I think we still have more information to share. But until then, Abby and Chris, do you guys have the mic?
I do.
Awesome.
I have a couple maybe neighborhood specific thoughts that would be great with Jay and then the gentleman in the back. There's part of the Woodland Hills Association or whatever that could, or WHHO, that could put this on maybe a side afterwards, but it mostly concerns the Dirt Mulholland situation, because I feel like from Natoma down to Serenia, that's like a real big threat zone for, I would say, most of the people in here. And where Abby and I live, like from my bedroom window, we get a view of a lot of activity on Dirt Mulholland, pretty much from like Rosario on up to the top in Natoma, and depending on where. And the first thing deals with jurisdiction. So like in past years, there seems to have been a lot more brush clearance. And maybe that's something that we could all do, but when it's public land, I don't know, like, is this plot of land, is this city, state, county, or who's responsible for it? So even where to go to start to even get an answer, like maybe there's a good reason why the brush clearance hasn't happened. So I don't make any judgment about that, but it's also really difficult to know where to get an answer, like why on this particular parcel of land where in years past it's been cleared, why is it not now, and knowing who handles that. And then the other thing that we see a lot, because like I said, our bedroom window looks over the hills, is I see people at like 3 in the morning in 4-wheel drive trucks driving off-roading through that brush. And so that's a huge threat. And in the past, you know, you would think like, okay, we could call. And I know that's like not our home specific, but if any of that area goes up, all of our homes are threatened. And I know that like getting somebody up there to do something, it would be really, really difficult in a timely fashion. So I don't know how you would go about like making that so that doesn't happen anymore. And I mean, even like 2 days after Christmas, I was walking my dog past the first bench to the second bench. So this is past where people are allowed to go. And like I saw a guy on a 2-stroke dirt bike motorcycle driving around off-roading back there. And I had talked to some people and they're like, there's no way that they could stop that or monitor that. But also that feels to me, like to all of our homes, that feels like a really big risk. If there's gonna be another fire, it's gonna be, because it's a really popular way for people to get in and out of Topanga, and there's also a lot of brush there. So it'd be monitoring that safe zone, like having some clearance, and also figuring out a way to keep as many people from going off trail with a lot of actual vehicles, which can also cause a fire.
Yeah, a couple of quick thoughts there, and I know, ma'am, you've got, actually, if you have something to add, maybe just add it. And, yeah.
It was more of a question, and it was something I know I talked to Leslie about. I'm just wondering about training, like arson watch, is that something?
Yeah, that got brought up.
That's
and
on our list to discuss.
We're going to
That's why-
talk about that because I have some thoughts about that, and I think it's an exciting idea, but I want to challenge you all if you're thinking about that to do
Okay,
more. As far as, you're going to have something, I'm going to turn to you in 1 second, but let me talk first. So as far as what do you do about people screwing around in the open space around your house and whether or not they're allowed to. Engagement with groups like the one that the gentleman in the back has brought up is probably the biggest way to make sure that your city and county government is coming to enforce laws that exist and stop folks from doing that. As far as understanding whose responsibility it might be, a resource that you can turn to are just public land ownership maps. This is all public knowledge. This is all public. You guys all probably have Watch Duty on your phones, and one of the layers on Watch Duty you can turn on is ownership. And you can see who owns all these plots of lands, and whether if it's a name, it's a person, it's private land, and then that gets into a little bit of dealing with, a private landowner who what are their obligations, how much do they want to do. But if it's open space, you'll be able to see, is it owned by the parks, is it owned and managed by the Park Service, is it state or county, is it the city? You'll be able to see whose area of responsibility it is and whose office you need to call up to try to bug to get it done. And so that's a good way to kind of get a sense of who you need to be pestering when it's not your land and you don't know whose land it is.
Just quick.
Well, howdy neighbors, how are you? My name's Dave. I live up on Morrow, across the street from Kyle. I think, and I want to thank you guys first and foremost for bringing all this together. It's pretty great because the most important thing you can have is information, right? If you don't know, it induces a certain amount of panic. You're like, what do we do? Learn about it, get prepared. Let me give you a little bit of my background. I don't panic easily. I was a surgical tech for 30 years in the operating room. So I kind of had to have a cool head. And then before that, I was in the military for 6 years. So I had this certain affect about me that just remains calm until it's time to panic. And sadly, my wife did not. We evacuated to the desert for 4 days, but the fire was well away from us. But it was nice out there. But the most important thing is, especially with an event like this, is it brings everybody together. We can all actually see who's driving by now. Like, hey, But if we band together as a community and be informed and be participatory, and just because. And I will let you know a fact about myself. I'm a little nosy. I've driven down Topanga Canyon many times with my little car. And if you see me, sometimes I have a little green and white flashing lights on my car, and I have a PA system. So if I buzz you or beep you or whatever, I'm just saying hi. I'm not, trying to start a fight or anything. But I think the most important thing, like you said, is just to be prepared. Have your go bag. There's a list. I don't know if you guys know this or not, but you can buy earthquake bags on Amazon. And I have 3 backpacks in my house because, I never know where I put things, and hopefully I'll find it. But, just being prepared is probably the best measure, and being informed is more importantly than that. So,
Yeah, actually,
here you go.
That's a great transition.
Yeah, so if we have to kind of cut you all off, it's not to be rude, but I know that people have been waiting to talk. Lexi, Michael, Sarah in the back, and then the pizza is here. Don't run for the doors yet. But Lexi, please, go for it.
Just really quick, I was just wondering if we have like an emergency focused listserv or some way, because the text chains got full. So I was wondering how we would get communication from this community, or if we just keep going with the chunky text chains. So I was wondering about that. And also, we get those notifications in the mail about brush clearing, but I don't know if people have interest in having a organized committee for the spaghetti neighborhood or whatever we're called, to give recommendations that go beyond the mandatory ones, or if there's any way to stay organized and get information, because I think people move in and out of the neighborhood and they don't always know, and so if there's ways to get information or recommendations, I would certainly follow those recommendations. I don't know the recommendations, so I just wanted to say I'm interested in having information and having recommendations and being connected, and that's it.
That actually leads me to something that I wanted to observe on earlier while we're moving the microphone around. You all in the room should be pretty proud of your neighborhood right now, because you're already starting this work. You're ahead of my neighborhood in getting to know each other, in getting these information sharing mechanisms set up, in understanding what you need to do and what you need to be asking your neighbors to do. So doesn't mean you don't have more work to do. It doesn't mean that there's not still plenty of mitigation and preparedness to dedicate time to, but you all should be really proud of already where your neighborhood is.
Hi, I'm Michael. I live on the corner of Morrow and Rios. And I actually want to defer to and introduce Dan. I'm just going to give a very, very brief overview, and he'll give a little bit more detail. 5.5 months ago, there was a fire from an electrical pole. And so he's going to talk a little bit about what had happened. And one of our group texts chains started as a result of that fire, and he'll be a little bit more specific. I want to piggyback after I hand the mic over to Dan to just mention, because of that fire, obviously there's a lot of tree trimming by these companies. They're all over the place. I have tried to trim a lot of those wires, the trees. You call the phone company, they say, no, we don't do that. You call the Wi-Fi company, they don't do that. And then you call DWP and they say, well, that's not our wire. I see them doing all of this. I asked, and this is maybe a question for, is it Johnny? Maybe with the association, and maybe for Councilman Blumenfeld. I was thinking maybe there's a way of having DWP with those trees doing it, and while they're doing it, instead of having 3 companies, 2 of which don't really send out trucks at all, maybe they could share the cost if it's their line. One company is doing it because everyone seems to be deferring, we don't do it, and it would make sense because of those electrical fires and the embers had really, because of the electrical fire. So I'd just like to turn it over to Dan, who is going to be speaking anyway, and he'll tell a little bit about how that started.
Leslie, are we going to break for a bit, or? Because I have a few things. I mean, what I'm going to say is probably, it's not a few minutes, so Is this a good time to break, would you say?
If you may, I'd like to make a quick comment before you take a break on this one. I'm back at the back of the room back here. Concerning what you had to say with the brush and what have you that's around, what you need to be aware of, which is kind of strange, that when you find a neighbor that's got brush that's on their vacant land that needs to be taken care of, the fire department comes out and will cite them for that. But here's the problem. After they cite them for it, if they don't clear it at that point, the city then is supposed to have somebody come in and actually clear the property and then put a lien on the property for the expense of having done that. Here's the difficulty. The fire department, we had one happen across the street from me on that point. I go, well, this is good that you're doing this. And I go, that's very nice. He said, this is the last one we're doing. I go, why is that? We have no more monies in the fire department to do this for the clearance. So as a result, there's a lot of properties that have not been touched that really should be with clearance because the property owners are not doing it because there's a lack of the funds for the fire department to do it. You need to stay on your council members and all those elected officials you've got to make sure they have the proper funding to do exactly that. That's the problem to it. As far as the electrical stuff is concerned, I call them telephone poles. I get stopped very quickly. They're not telephone poles, they're utility poles. Why? Because the utilities are using those poles more than the electric. The electric's all the way up at the top. The stuff that's down below it is basically your cables and telephone lines. So as a result, if your vegetation's in those lower lines, they don't care. Why? Because it's not a sparkable issue. It's the upper lines that are. I had DWP had come by at one point to cut one of the oak trees I've got that's growing up into those. I said, take it all the way down so we get below the lines for the communication lines. They said, no, we can only take it down just so far. So they brought it down about 5 feet below the electrical lines up at the top. And I go, well, that's fine for the fires, but that's going to grow back. You guys are going to be back out here again, so that's all we're authorized to do. Thank you very much. Talk to your council members and others to say they need to bring those things down so that we don't have problems with it. During this last fire that we had up there, the first night, the winds were horrible up in the canyons, 50, 60, 70 mile an hour winds. I'm looking out the back window and I see a spark coming off of one of the power lines. And all the lights were still lit in the canyon. We're talking about canyon off of Canoga. And that's where those fires start from that particular process. So I went out and go down to take a look and see if those sparks had done anything. And they had not, fortunately. But it was that groan sound you hear when those transformers blow and that big spark, that big blue light that you'll see, and then the sparks coming down. Very scary, especially in those winds. Nothing had happened at that point. But I called DWP and said to them, listen, I don't know if you had a blue transformer out here or whatever. And I said, with still lights that are up here, still lights are down at the bottom of the canyon. What do you want to do? And about 10 minutes later, the lights went off. They disconnected them from up there, which is what they should do because that's where we're going to get most of the fires. We sued people out in the Woolsey fire. Who do we go after? Southern Cal Edison. Why? Because they screwed up on the stuff they were doing and allowed those lines to basically arc and cause those fires to start and burn all the way to Malibu. And it was devastating what they ended up doing to those areas.
Johnny, on one point about the fire clearance, on the debris clearance, does anybody know, is there a local place to take extra debris? Like if you have beyond what your green bin can take, is there?
Once per year, they will pick up your extra beyond what's in the green. You need to call them, or I think online you can file a request for them to pick it up. You do need to bundle everything. I believe it's 4 by 4 feet or something like that, but they will do that, yeah, for free once a year.
Yeah, and the major thing is clearing off that brush, though, that needs to be cleared off.
Johnny, I think folks were going to break for pizza. Good reason
thank
to
you all.
break.
Thank you
and
for
when
the
we come
presentation.
back, the floor is Dan's. Okay, thanks.
She found it. It's so. I thought she took it. Is it on? Is the mic on? Oh, yeah. I'm not sure how far this goes. Okay, can everybody hear me? So I think we're going to go ahead and get started in like 5 minutes. If you could take your seats for those that are still staying. For those that are leaving, thank you for coming.
Hi, everyone. I think we're going to get started in a second.
Okay, let's go ahead and get started. I know this is fun, but it is a Sunday and we're spending all this time together with all these new people, and let's get rolling so we can all go home also to our other things. I still have to go grocery shopping.
All right, so folks, so here's what we're going to do. I want Jay to talk about his 2 recent op-ed pieces for the LA Times, and then he is going to transition to, I always call you Dave, I'm sorry, Dan, to Dan, who is going to talk to us about some of the highlights of his CERT training, which I think all of us are going to be able to benefit from. So Jay.
So I'm going to be really quick to kind of stay out of the way and let him do some talking there. But I wanted to let, at Leslie's urging, point you guys to some things that I wrote the last couple of weeks. If you were to Google those 2 titles or my name in LA Times, you'll get that stuff up. And the first one that I wrote, just put yourself back in that situation that you might have been in the day or day right after everything sort of started. And there was a lot of stuff circulating on social media. And one of the things that happened was the City of Los Angeles Fire Department put out a call for off-duty firefighters to report for duty. This is a relatively routine thing that happens in major events. Oftentimes it'll happen before the event even. But they're just basically asking for folks who are on their days off to stop having a day off and come in to work. A lot of people misinterpreted that and thought that the City of Los Angeles Fire Department was calling on anybody with firefighting training to report to the fire lines or something like that. And I had friends send me these social media posts saying, like, are you going to go help? Because they knew I was a firefighter. I was horrified and aghast because a bunch of untrained, uncoordinated folks showing up at a fire line is a great way for a lot of people to die. And it spurred me to sort of write this op-ed. And what this op-ed talks about is that in the initial days, and even now, right now, weeks later, there's been an outpouring of energy in our city. There have been so many people who've wanted to get involved, who've wanted to help, who've been grasping at any opportunity to try to do something, right? This is why you see people showing up with carloads of food and clothes at the Santa Anita racetrack. And how much use was that? Well, people didn't know, but they were just trying to do anything they could. These calls for people to just show up on the fire lines and try to help. It was wrong, but it was out of a place of desire to help the community, to show up and be there. And that's an energy that I think is a really positive aspect of Los Angeles, of our community character, is we have a lot of people who, in the moment of most need, woke up and said, I need to be doing more, I need to find a way to help, I need to get out the door and start doing something, right? Now that we've been on the back end of an event like this, I hope that the next time that we see that sort of energy, we've developed pathways for people to get involved in ways that are immediately useful, organized, and all serving the organized goal of getting through these events. One of the ways to do that is called the CERT. I guess not, CERT teams is repetitive because it's Community Emergency Response Teams. So you can't call it CERT teams, that'd be teams. But they're an LAFD managed construct, I believe, correct? An LAFD managed construct within the City of Los Angeles that harnesses community volunteers and tries to incorporate them into the formal emergency management and response system. This isn't the only way to get involved. There's also things like the Red Cross, the American Red Cross, or other volunteer organizations active during disasters, like I'd mentioned earlier. But CERTs are a really great program that popped up after the Northridge earthquake that our city does. And if I have a criticism of CERTs as a researcher and as somebody who thinks about this stuff all the time, it's not actually anything with the CERT program, it's the fact that the CERT program is not big enough and not enough people have joined it. So I wanted to kind of use that as an opportunity to kick off and let you guys hear a little bit about the CERT program, what it entails, and if it's something that interests any of you, or if you know neighbors who might be interested in it, how you could possibly get involved.
And Danny, please start with your full name, if you wouldn't
Sure.
mind, or where you live.
My name is Danny Mulvihill. I live on Rios, right up from the intersection of Rios and Morrow. And we've been there for 2.5 years now, and we absolutely love the place. It's the best neighborhood I've ever lived and it's just, people are great and really enjoying it. But I want to backtrack a little bit, and the reason that I got into CERT was an incident that happened in our neighborhood in the beginning of August. So we had a brush fire, and this is on the corner of Rios and Morrow, pretty extensive one. I was alerted by our neighbor running up and down the street. I don't know if you're familiar with Rios, a very narrow street, one-lane street. He woke me up, I looked out the window, had no idea what was going on until I looked to the right and I see my neighbor's yard engulfed in flames. And it was probably 80 feet long by 20 feet wide, flames going up, 10, 15 feet. And I called so what happened then, I immediately ran out, grabbed the hose, and Shannon, the neighbor who lives there, said, "Don't go any further, there's a line down." So I stayed back and, got a hose on it the best I could. And we tried to, I think Shannon may have had one on it too, but it took the fire department 20 minutes to get there. And it's an 8-minute drive from Fire Station 84, which is on Burbank. So I called them about that. They didn't really know, but he agreed that they should have been there in half the time. And the first truck that came, actually, we thought, okay, here they are. Finally, they've arrived. It went down Marmora and kept going. It didn't turn on Rios. So we're thinking, what is going on here? They're going somewhere else. So I called them again. They said, yeah, they're going somewhere else. He didn't really know. So then they sent another truck. That truck got there, and then other one finally came back. But what almost happened is there were 2 cars parked there, and the flames were literally up to the cars. So, I don't know, 5 more minutes, 3 more minutes, those cars would have started on fire. So fortunately, we were able to kind of prevent it from spreading, but, it's definitely a good idea to know what to do in a situation like that and be very proactive in calling. We probably called 911 8 times or so, and they finally did send another truck, but you really have to be on it. So that's kind of what led me into becoming more involved, but also wanting to know what to do in a situation, emergency or disaster situation. And through my research, I came across CERT. And what CERT is, it's as Jay said, community emergency response team. So it's based on citizens volunteering their time, learning what to do, and it came out as a result of I think it was the mid-'80s, the earthquake in Mexico City. And because of that, there was a lot of people who wanted to help, hundreds of them, but unfortunately they weren't trained, and a lot of them died helping. So that's why LA decided to do that, to actually train the people who do want to help and give them the knowledge so that not only can they help their neighbors, but they're not going to get hurt too. So that's kind of why I got involved in it. So a lot of it, and what I'll do is it's a big manual here. We're going to create a folder on Google Drive. So I will upload this manual. It's got a lot of great information in it. And there's some other documents I think we'll put it on, and I think we can kind of keep that, right, Les, as sort of an ongoing thing for the community. And
if I can just add to that, so I think one of the many things we want to do when this is over is we want to, number one, take everything that was discussed today, disseminate it. But Dan had this great idea yesterday about creating like a folder, and I'm gonna maybe even like let you do it since you had a great idea.
Absolutely.
I will help you because, but yeah. So the main thing we're trying to do is have today be the most useful thing it can be, and that would really entail us figuring out a way to continue to collect information and make sure it's available to everyone. Oh wait. Yeah, oh yeah, before you finish, Dan, please tell everyone how they can do what you did, which is join CERT and whatever else they need to know.
And I'll share Leslie created a spreadsheet, I don't know if some of you are maybe aware of, for us to add information, suggestions on how to keep our community safe, things to prepare for, questions we might have. So I'll add that on there, but I don't know what the website is offhand, but they have programs all over, Calabasas, Westlake. I'm doing the Sherman Oaks one just because that was the one that was available. Woodland Hills has one starting in March. I believe it's full though, and I think now that these disasters happen, a lot of people are really getting involved too. So anyone can join, and you don't necessarily have to join a team afterwards, because what the main reason, or the, I guess, idea behind it is that so people have the knowledge to go in there, and as a CERT member, you are kind of a first responder, because during a disaster, depending on what the magnitude is, it's going to be some time before the professionals get there. So it's basically people having the knowledge of knowing what to do. And then in addition to that, they can also go, like a lot of CERT team members worked on the Palisades fire too. So there's also those opportunities, but you don't have to do that. It's just, you can go there, take the course, learn what you need to learn, take from it, and that's it. That's all it really entails. The initial part is, I believe, 6 weeks, and it's just 2.5 hours a week, something like that. It's really not a big time commitment. And then if you do become a team member, there's a lot more training to go and certifications and things like that. But just to get the knowledge, it's not a huge commitment, really. So I definitely encourage everybody who has any interest in that in learning, because it's definitely, especially for us, just on a personal level, knowing these things to do, it's huge. And not only is it going to protect you, but I think it gives you the peace of mind to know what to do. And and that goes a long way too. So what I think I'll do is just share a couple points here. It's a lot of information here, and you really can get into the weeds on it, but I think there's a couple things that are important and probably are worth mentioning. Things, and Jay mentioned about having that go bag ready, have that going. Leslie has a couple. I think she keeps them in her car, she said.
We're going to talk a little bit about the go bag in a second.
Yeah, so things like that, having this stuff prepared in advance, having water, you want, and this, I think we're focused on wildfire right now because that's what's happening. But the really bigger threat with us in terms of everything shutting down, and those of you who were here for the Northridge quake knows that, you could be without services for days or weeks even during an earthquake. And obviously we're an earthquake country, so that's a huge thing of having enough water, a gallon per person per day, and having at least a 3-day supply of that, but probably more like 5 or 10 even if you're, if it is a really big earthquake, the big one. And you do want to replace that water every 6 months too. And another point that I just learned is that don't store it on the concrete, because the concrete will leach into that plastic, and then that you can no longer drink that. So I didn't realize that, but you want to put it onto like wooden planks or something like that too, and definitely change it out every once in a while. In addition to that, you probably want to keep some bleach and iodine on hand too, just because if you run out of water, don't have enough, the water supply is compromised, you can do some purification of that, or even a filter too is fine as well. You want to store at least a 3-day supply of non-perishable food. If you have camping gear, great. Little camping stoves, those kind of things work. Propane, butane, first aid kits. Make sure those are up to date, because sometimes those items do expire. And then anything else like extra medication. In an earthquake, infrastructure is going to be down. You're not going to be able to get to the pharmacy. You need to have, if you have life-dependent medication, you want to have extra supply. Not just your current supply, but more just in case you need that. And those are a couple items. And if you want to get in depth and really see, there's some really good ideas here and lists of things that you should prepare for. And, you want to do it when you have time to do it. A lot of our friends, my kids go to school in Santa Monica. A lot of people from the Palisades, so a lot of them did lose their houses, unfortunately. And many didn't have anything ready to go. They escaped with maybe a few things, few items, or sometimes none. They didn't even make it back home. So it's really spend that time now when you're thinking about it, and you have the time to do it. That's really when to do it. A little bit here about too mitigation. Jay talked a bit about that. One great program right now that we just participated in is the EBB, Earthquake Brace and Bolt. It's a FEMA-funded program, and you get, I think, up to $3,000 to bolt your foundation. And we did that a few months ago, and this zip code was just added this year, too, so it's great. It's going to cost a little more than that, but it's, you know, it's a little bit that helps quite a bit.
Hey, Dan, I'm sorry. Would you mind defining what bolting a foundation is? I do not know. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. So you're basically taking the foundation of the house, and they have these brackets, which are like that big, and they bolt it from the mud sill, which is on top of your concrete foundation. They bolt it from that down to the mud sill. And that goes all the way around the house, 5 to 6 feet all around. So and also if you have a cripple wall, which is this little wall basically of 2x4s, they're going to reinforce that with plywood because that's not going to hold up in an earthquake. So if the ground shakes, your foundation goes one way. If you don't have it bolted, the rest could go the other way. So this is keeping it in one place. Yes?
One thing to be careful on, the last earthquake, FEMA was doing this in Beverly Hills. Oh, FEMA was doing this in Beverly Hills. And they brought in FEMA contractors, and they were using hurricane anchors. So when I got brought in, one, they only did like every other one they were supposed to do, but two, hurricane anchor was absolutely useless for earthquakes. So you got to be real careful on contractors.
Yeah, I think
there's a
it's
state
called,
program that supplements this as well. There's websites, if you just Google California earthquake bolting funding, you can put your zip code in and it will tell you what funding's available and where it comes from, and how much you might be able to get.
Yeah, and they also, it's not just bolting, they also do soft story retrofits too, which is considerably more expensive, but I think that goes up to maybe $10,000 in terms of grants too.
And that's really important if any of you own multifamily dwellings and act as a landlord there. Having those retrofitted, the soft story retrofitting is hugely important for like the kind of 2-story apartment buildings that are all over town.
Yeah, and you also do, if you have earthquake insurance, you will get a discount too once you're retrofitted as well.
Hey, Dan, the bolting, how, on average, what would that run someone?
You know, it goes by square footage, but, you know, I got, and I tend to overdo this, but I got probably 10 quotes, and they ranged anywhere from 5 to 25,000. So 25,000 was way, way, way on top. But I think, you know, to get it within the range of 6 to 7 is probably not too far off base. So then you cut 3,000 off that. So, you know, your out-of-pocket's several thousand, but...
Okay, I'm being redundant here.
Yeah.
But please add all that to the spreadsheet, that things to do column. I mean, technically it goes in both, right? You have to pay for it. So it's something you're buying,
Yeah.
it's something you're doing.
Yeah.
But, yeah, so please throw that in there if you don't mind.
Yeah, and I can even provide the company who did it too. They did a great job, and it doesn't take that long. They just basically go in there and do the work, bowl everything. I think it took them 3 days, something like that. You have to clean everything out, you know, make sure the workspace is open, but it's really not a big deal at all. You know, other things like anchoring furniture, bookshelves, machinery, whatever, to the wall so that doesn't move. That's real important. The
TVs
cabinets
are big now.
also.
TVs,
yeah. Mirrors, yeah. Don't put big pictures over your bed, you know, that are going to fall on you in an earthquake. You know, that's, I mean, in the Northridge, everything came down. You know, so it's something that you want to do definitely. And then just things to, you know, harden your home. We've talked a lot about defensible space. That's real important. And I think for me, you know, knowing that, always thinking, okay, the fire is coming from out there, you know, from the wildlands, and because the wind blows in that direction towards a hill, we're kind of safe, right? I mean, it's not too bad, but at least better than the other side. But if it starts inside, that's the problem. I mean, and it can, and it did. And what really amazed me is that there wasn't a lot of brush there. I mean, cars parked there, and it was basically leaves and twigs as well as a few, plants. And it was really hard to put out, and without getting up close to it, we couldn't. So really keep that area clean. And so it's not just creating a space around your house, you got to get the leaves up, the brushes, the twigs, those sorts of things. That does make a difference. And the other thing that I think was pretty important is that the LEDWP will come in and remove brush, and they were just on Rios a few days ago doing that. They'll cut down the lines, but they will not take the trees that are way up on top. And I talked to the supervisor for the West Valley, and he said, the main thing that you could, if you want to keep your neighborhood safe, your neighbors safe, have them make sure that the area above the power lines, the three ones that are on the very top, not the service lines, are clear from any kind of branches falling, because that's exactly what happened to us. It fell on, shorted the lines out, and that was it. The other point we talked about too was screens on the attic vents, on the foundation vents. You want that, basically any space to be greater than 1/8 of an inch, because embers can get into garage doors, attic vents, foundation vents, front doors, windows. So you want to make sure that stuff is all kind of buttoned up and taken care of. Double pane windows.
Can I just interrupt real fast with this? This sounds like a daunting list probably to folks, especially if you've never thought about this. A way to kind of think about this that I think makes it less daunting is trying to understand the reason behind it. The reason behind it is that there's no such thing as a fireproof house. No matter what you do to build a fireproof house, you fill it with a bunch of flammable stuff, because we as human beings like to nest and we like to live in soft places. And so no matter what you do to make your house fireproof, it's always going to be flammable on the inside. So what you're really doing is you're trying to prevent ember intrusion into the house. When houses become fully involved, as we call it, in a wildfire, they really burn from the inside out. And so you're trying to, with these window screens, with double pane windows, with the maintenance of good flashing along the roof, what you're trying to do is make sure that embers can't get into the house. So if it sounds daunting, it is daunting, but try to think of it that way. Keep that goal in mind, and it makes the boxes to check just make a little bit more sense.
Yeah, and you just do a little at a time, It's not like you have to rush in and get everything done. And then one other point too, and I saw this just in the visual, the photography that they did, the videos from the Palisades fires. You'd see these houses, nothing's on fire except for everything that's wood, the garage doors. Literally, the garage door's on fire, nothing else is. So I think also flame retardant paint is a good idea too. That's going to help prevent that. And you can do top coats as well. And I'll post some links. It can get pretty pricey, but there are some less pricey. It's definitely not, you're not going to be paying, Home Depot prices for it, but, I think you can get a 5-gallon bucket for $300, $350, something like that, so it's not too bad. And that's pretty much it. I wanted to share one other thing. I mean, there's a lot of information here. I encourage you to join CERT, read the manuals. But one thing that I learned that I didn't know, I had no idea about, is because there was a potential transmission line down, what do you do? Like, how close can you get? And I just had no idea. So basically, obviously you want to stay away, but you don't want to get any closer than about 35 feet on the lower lines, the ones that we have in our neighborhood. But if you are in a car and one lands on you, obviously you want to stay in the car, right? However, if the car's on fire and you need to leave, you have to escape. The one thing you do not want to do is take your foot and step on the ground, because then you create an arc. The electricity wants to get grounded, it goes right into the ground at that point. So you want to kind of jump out of the car and then shuffle your feet about at least 35 feet away. If you bring your foot up, that's it. You're going to get electrocuted. So I never really thought much about that, but this whole thing sort of opened my eyes to it, and yeah, just kind of interesting information. So anyway, that's it. Again, thanks, Jay and Leslie. Yeah, it's a great thing that you guys are doing. It's awesome.
Thank you. And we're going to transition over to talk a little bit more about things you can do, but I wanted to just use this opportunity with CERT to mention too that CERT's an opportunity and an option for a lot of folks. It kind of lives in that middle of like a small choice to a big choice, right? Maybe you're not the kind of person who's got enough time or the kind of energy to dedicate to something like CERT. Maybe that scares the heck out of you and you just don't really want to be part of a team like that. There's plenty that you can do that's a little bit less involved. You can go take a CPR class, a first aid class, start getting involved with some of the brush clearing activities that it sounds like this neighborhood's starting to get off the ground. Those are ways to be a little bit less involved but still bring a lot of organized value into your neighborhood in a major event, a disaster or the kinds of events that trigger a disaster. There's also things that are bigger than CERT if you want. You can join the Red Cross and help to run some of the evacuation centers. You can join search and rescue teams. Those are volunteer in Los Angeles County. I don't think a lot of people know that. You all are under the jurisdiction of the Malibu team. I don't know if they're recruiting or not, but if you really wanted to do something like that, look them up. I'm in the process of joining one out by where I live now, and they're a way to kind of get even more involved with these emergency response systems. But anyway, there's a wide spectrum is my point there. CERT might be right for you. If it is, like I said, my biggest criticism with CERT is that not enough people are in CERT, but there's lots of other options. If CERT sounded scary to you, there's plenty you can do that's not quite that intense.
Yeah, so I was thinking, folks, I think it's been a long afternoon, so we're almost done, but I want to end just with maybe Jay and I giving our 2 cents worth of thoughts on something that Dan mentioned, and that's the go bag. And the reason why I think we should end with that is because all these suggestions you laid out are great. Some of them do have a large price tag, I get it. The go bag is something that we can literally, each of us right now, go to our house and think about either updating, building if we don't already have it, updating, you name it. So
and helping your neighbors have. If you've got an elderly neighbor, a bedridden neighbor, somebody with mobility problems or too many kids to be able to be thinking about this kind of stuff right now, it's a way that you can help them too, is you can go next door and you can say, hey, you got a go bag? If not, I'm going to help you build one today and we're going to get it figured out and set it by your door so that it's ready to go.
Right, and so Dan, I'm thinking about our neighbor Paula. She lives alone. She's elderly. I think you remember me asking on one of the text chains, is she mobile? How mobile is she? She has 6 cats, no carriers. Okay, so maybe after we have this discussion, we talk to her and ask her if she has a go bag. But you're the expert here, Jay. I want to start by really quickly telling what I think are some problematic, well, there's nothing problematic about having a go bag. But I will say, though, there are certain things I think one has to think through. So number one, it's hands down a great idea. And by go bag, all we mean is some type of thing you can take with you if you have to get out of the house quickly. It doesn't have to literally be a backpack, but it has to be something that can hold whatever you need for it to hold. I will say, Lisa, do you remember one time I came to you like 8 years ago, like, let's start a side business, like making go bags for like celebrities in Hollywood, because we have all this experience from our time, deployed during the wars. It never manifested. Still a good idea though. But I think about
you
it
got
now.
beat to market. There's a company that does that. You can buy like fancy
but
bespoke
Jay,
go bags.
Lisa and I were going to do it totally different. Sorry. Anyway, but here's something I think about, and I think you touched on it, and is the fact that this go bag, however you construct it, whatever the contents are, has to be monitored and updated regularly. And if you have kids, it's a whole different thing. And I'm not saying that to dissuade anyone from doing it, but I think you need to really think through the contents and make sure that they're applicable. And I'm also guessing you want that bag to be as light and transportable as possible. What I tend to do is I have one in each car, and I have one in the house, but I'll admit the fact that I have not updated mine. And I really, really need to. I think at one point I looked at it and I had like newborn diapers and my kid was like 4. I'm like, that's not gonna work. And she's potty trained now, but at that point. But the point is just that it needs to be something you think through with regularity.
And customized to you. That's kind of the point here, is that these things are bespoke. There's a FEMA list that you can go on and look up all the things you're supposed to have, and everyone needs 3 days of food and a gallon of water per person per day for the amount of time that you think you might need to be off the grid, and a wind-up AM/FM radio with some batteries and a flashlight. But I don't need glasses. My wife does those, so we've got an old pair of glasses in our go bag that's for her. but that's not something that a go bag that's just for me would need to have. Medication, I don't take any medication routinely, but people who do need to make sure that they've got that in their go bags and things ready to go. I don't have children, so I don't need to worry about children, but I've got a dog and she's pretty high maintenance, so I've got a toy and some dog treats in there for when my dog's losing her mind in an evacuation shelter and I can chill her out and calm her down. This stuff has to be bespoke to you. Think about the things in your life that if you needed to go somewhere, you might need to rely upon. A deck of cards, a crossword book, something like that to get you through things can be really important to put in these kinds of bags, especially if, like I said, you've got kids or you've got a pet or something like that that you need to take care of. Pet food often gets forgotten, things like that. One thing that I want to mention about the go bags as well is that one of the most important components of the go bag is the plan to use it. Making an evacuation plan is one of the most important things that you can do before an event that can really speed up the process of getting out of your home if you need to do it in a hurry. And when I say evacuation plan, I mean things like having a paper map and an idea of your neighborhood and where you might go. I mentioned I'm married. My wife and I have paper maps in our cars and one in our go bag that have places we'd go and has X's marked on the map for basically rendezvous points, for if we're both apart, where we would meet up. In case we can't get cell signal, we both know where to go and how to get there. That's important to have. Things you might need to grab. There are things that are emotionally important to me that if I'm not home, my wife is and has the time to grab them, she knows where the journals that my mom wrote me are and the blanket that she needs to grab and the thing off the wall that's most important to me. Make a list of those kinds of things and make sure people in your house have that list and know what to grab. A lot of people get tied up on building clothes. One second, and then I'll turn right over to you. Grabbing clothes and things like that. If you're in a hurry and you need to grab stuff, the best clothing to grab is your laundry basket. Because that's the stuff that you used the last week. It's seasonally appropriate. It's the stuff that you actually use. You can always go wash it later. Grab your laundry basket, throw it in the car. There's your clothes. Good, done. That's an easy one to do. But things like this plan, this paper map, and the idea of what you're going to grab and when and where you're going to go when you leave and how you're going to leave, that's really, really, really important and often gets forgotten when people do something like look at the FEMA list and put together their food and their water and their batteries and their flashlight. You had a question or a comment?
A couple things more. On your folders, papers, what I'm starting to do is tag any folder I'm going to want because you want to keep them where they are, but you need to know what you're going to grab real fast. Backup on computers. You might want hard drives or something unless it's all up on Google, but if you're trying to do it on your own, you want to have stuff you can take. But I'm tagging boxes, I'm tagging pictures, and...
No. Keep going. Just keep speaking to the mic.
Just tagging everything, so you could just get little red tags on everything, of course, or you can have folders all in one spot, but it simplifies life. And then have a recap of all your consultants, anybody you need, phone numbers, so you can always grab that sheet.
No, I wanted to add to that, not stop you from talking. Sorry about if it made it seem that way. No, that's super important, and these documents are something that I wanted to talk about next. If you have the technical know-how and the desire to do it, digitizing this is a great way of doing it, keeping on Google Drive so it's ready to go. We've got one of those fireproof safes that has our mortgage information and our passports and all that stuff in it, and it's water and fire safe. They're not really that fire safe. The reason I've got that thing is so that I can grab it and throw it in the car if we're actually leaving. It's just a central location. It's a box that I know all the really important stuff is in and that I throw it in. Remember when I talked about how recovery is happening pretty much simultaneously with response in these sorts of situations? Having that kind of information with you is really, really important because if you have to call your insurance company and start working through dealing with these processes, you need those documents. You need to know who your insurance company is. You need your mortgage information. You need your property information and all that kind of stuff. Have that ready to go or have it digitized. Have it be part of your go bag. Go bag's not just human survival. It's also going to be helping you put your life back together if something does happen and things do go bad. On that note as well, one thing, I think we were going to both offer some little tips of things. I guess we've been doing that already with me bringing up my dog and things like that. Little tips, things you don't think about to throw in there. Throw a blank notebook in your go bag because the moment you leave, if your house is lost, one thing that you need to start doing is a recovery journal. Don't rely on your memory when you're living through the trauma of losing your home. Start writing down everything. Write down the time you left, where you went, who you called, when you called them, what they said. Start documentation early because it can be really instrumental to making sure that you're made as whole as possible in the end. A couple of hands threw up, but just wanted to bring up the recovery journal. I'm going to grab the woman in the back first, and then I'll grab you. Yeah.
And then pens along with the journal, because a journal without a writing utensil is pretty much useless.
One thing I just wanted, if somebody sees a sign-up sheet, it went around again,
Oh,
so.
yeah. Here it is.
Perfect, okay, you
Yeah.
have it, awesome. The one thing that we did that was so helpful is we went through our whole entire house and videoed every single room and opened up drawers and cupboards, so that if, when your mind is going a mile a minute, you can't remember things for the journal, you can have it all on video. That was a good.
That's great, Jane.
Great tip, yeah. But yeah, so we're bringing up these little things, and this might seem small and ancillary. The reason we're doing that is because the classic contents of a go bag are so easy to Google and find that I'm not going to insult you guys by just going through the FEMA list. You can find that list yourself. It's important to, like we said, pay attention to the ways that this is personalized to you and your situation.
Yes. Oh, 1 second.
Sorry, my name is Linda. I just wanted to mention a couple of things that we have done, having lived in California all our lives, basically. If you do have a storage unit, it's a great place to store all your family photos, things like that that you might not have thought about. But for us, when we had to face possibility of having something burned, and we have a huge collection of photos, we took out a small, very small, inexpensive storage unit. We keep them there. The other thing that I almost forgot one of the times we were thinking about evacuating, but keys for safety deposit boxes, things like that that you might not find on other lists. I didn't find it on any list, so I thought of things like that that we put aside.
Keys, yeah, keys are important. I mean, keys are also really old school, and I think that's another point, too, that I'd like to bring up. I brought up paper maps. I am as tech connected as any average millennial, and I have paper backups of everything because, or everything that I'm going to need in an emergency event, because as someone I think mentioned earlier, you're not going to be able to trust the cell phone system to be live when you need it for at least a little while, right? So paper maps are really important. If you might have lived your entire life in LA, you might find yourself in a part of LA that you don't know well if you have to evacuate. So have a paper map, have a paper list of key phone numbers and contact information and medical information and numbers that you might need, copies of identification documents and passports and insurance cards. All those things are really important to have in this go bag as well, and probably on paper. Just because in the first day or two, you might not, especially after a large earthquake event, you might not be able to rely on internet connectivity to get into a Google Drive to get all those other documents. That can be where the mortgage stuff lives. That can be where the long-term important documents live. But for the short-term stuff, the stuff that's going to really help you get out of harm's way in a hurry, you're going to want that on paper.
How much time do we have to evacuate? When they say it's evacuation time, you get a half hour or 5 minutes?
Yeah, he's asking how much time to have to evacuate, and that's more art than science. It really depends on the event. It depends on how much time the emergency officials have to put together those kinds of orders, and as we were talking about before with how we can trust the system or not, it depends on how much time it takes for the order to get to you. So they try to aim to give people the amount of time that they think that neighborhood, given its demographics and connectivity to the rest of the city, would need. So the canyon neighborhoods get more time because they're harder to get in and out of than somewhere like Pasadena, which is on a grid system and there's 100 ways out. So it's an art, not a science, and you'll get as much time as they hope they can give you as much time as it would take to get you out.
In this situation with the fires, I mean, you could see the black smoke over the ridge, you couldn't see any flames, but we were a few blocks away from mandatory evacuation.
But Jim, I think, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I think, because I live, technically like 6 houses from you, if you go down 3, and right across from Adelaide. The order never came. I think those of us who did leave, we left voluntarily because it just seemed like, the neighborhood was full of smoke, right? And so I want to also ask Jay, because again, he's much more knowledgeable about this, but do you also recommend making the call on your own if your gut and common sense tells you you need to go, because I think we all, and this is talking news, not politics, but data is starting to come out that folks in Altadena, for example, they got the evacuation order late, very late.
Yes.
And I'm not faulting them, but so I think there's also this issue of monitoring whether we use WhatsApp, our network, But deciding on your own, you ought to go if you don't, and erring on the side of leaving rather than staying if you don't get that order. And if that's the case, I'm guessing you still want to get out as soon as you can with all your essential items.
Getting back to what I said earlier, this is art, not science, right? Generally speaking, the best evacuation is one where the people who needed to evacuate didn't wait to be told and had left already. So if you feel uncomfortable in your neighborhood because of something that's happening, if you see fire on the ridge and you say, why are they not telling us to leave yet? That's a good time to maybe just leave if you feel like you want to and that you have somewhere to go. However, when we start talking about things like the assistance that might be available to you for leaving, there's evacuation assistance that's available through FEMA and other entities for people who had to go to a hotel or something and stay somewhere because they were not allowed back in their neighborhood for an extended period of time. You're only going to get that assistance if you were in an official evacuation area. So some of this is an amount of privilege that hopefully you can rely on, but not everyone's going to be able to, right? So keep that in mind. But this is art, not science. If you feel uncomfortable and you feel like you need to leave, then leave. But also, and I'm going to get to you in 1 second, with all things here, I think it's important to be thinking about the ways that your actions affect the rest of the neighborhood as well. And that's true with evacuations. It's true with things like maybe you're over-tapping the water grid because you left your sprinklers on or something like that. You don't want to cause more burden on the situation than is warranted by your own personal conditions. So if leaving is going to create a whole ton of traffic and you really don't need to leave, I mean, balance things out a little bit. Don't do something that would leave you uncomfortable or in harm's way, but I think it was really good advice that they were giving in the days that the fires were really ripping to stay off the roads if you can, keep them clear for people who really need to use them to get out. In a place that gets choked by traffic quite often, it can really make a huge difference, even if you're not that close. So anyway, point being, and the official recommendation is don't wait to be told to leave. And that's a good rule to go by.
Okay. One point too, and this happened with a lot of our friends, is they got stuck in traffic in the Palisades. So one friend was stuck for 4 hours on Sunset Boulevard. Finally, they got out of the zone. So the advice that some of them have given us is leave early. Don't wait until everybody's leaving. You know, so, and that goes to your point, Jay, too. It's just, you know, that makes a lot of sense, and you want to get out of there in time, too. And the other point I wanted to make, too, is Leslie brought up one of our neighbors. If you know of anybody who is in need of, they're disabled or they need help getting out, you know, make sure there's a plan in place to help them. We had, someone was going to help our neighbor, and that was already planned out. They were going to take them too, but yeah, make sure you know who those people are. It's definitely
and a local plan too. If your plan to help your mother-in-law evacuate is to drive 20 minutes and go help her evacuate, then that's not a very good plan. One of her neighbors needs to be helping her, right? So help your neighbors too, and make sure that people who might need help in your life have help that's in their area and in their neighborhood, because you're not going to be able to get into the evacuation zone to go help somebody as everyone's trying to leave, right?
So I did leave because I was afraid I wasn't going to be able to get my cat if I had to go in a hurry. So I left, and I was told.
Good, yeah. Animals are a huge reason people leave early, yeah.
Yeah. I was told to turn all my breakers off and the gas. So is that true? And I wasn't strong enough to get the gas turned off, which is its own problem that I'll have to deal with. But I also thought, well, what about I have a hot tub? I open the lid to that because at least it's water. Are there things we should do when we leave, is the question.
Yeah, yes, there are. And the best way to know what to do will be to look up the jurisdiction that you're in's evacuation guidelines. LAFD's guidelines for evacuating in a fire actually don't say to turn your gas off unless you smell a gas leak. Because it's very, very complicated and logistically intense to go back and turn all those gas lines back on. And it's not really that big of a fire. The gas line's going to be a problem if your house is already fully involved. It's not going to help your house catch fire, right? That ember cast is what you're really worried about. As long as there's not a gas leak, the ember cast isn't going to make that big of a difference. So LAFD's specific recommendation on gas lines, I think, you'll want to double check me, is actually don't turn them off in a fire evacuation. A seismic event's a different story. So you'll want to kind of check your local guidelines there, because they're based on what the capacity of the community to go back through and turn everything back on again afterward is. As far as general advice for evacuating, say, in a wildfire, because that's what we're here to talk about generally, shut your blinds and your windows, shut your door, shut any vents you have, Turn off air purifiers and HVAC systems because you don't want anything sucking air into your house and circulating air around on all those flammables inside of it. As far as water sources, if you've got 5-gallon buckets or a pool or that you can uncover or something like that, fill those 5-gallon buckets up with water and place them at strategic points around your yard and make sure the pool's uncovered so that firefighters who are doing structure protection have access to that water, but don't leave things like lawn sprinklers on. If you've got spigots or outdoor faucets, make sure hoses are connected to them, but don't turn those on and charge them. Basically give firefighters who might be on your property the tools, but don't assume that they're actively going to be using them because that could just cause more problems than they solve. So yeah, close everything up, lock everything, make sure windows and blinds are shut and all air circulation systems of all kinds and vents are closed. And then fill up water, uncover hot tubs and pools, things like that is generally a good rule of thumb. As far as gas lines and power shutoffs and things like that, check your local jurisdiction's evacuation plans, which literally for you all that live in the city of LA, you can find by just Googling LAFD evacuation advice. And there'll be a plan.
That's what I was, that's.
Yeah, to repeat that, there's it's a state law, I believe, that they're red little metal boxes next to your gas meter that are the seismic shutoff valves that are supposed to shut off automatically in a seismic event, and that you can manually shut off if you want by taking a screwdriver, and there's a little screw in there that says off or on and turning it. But those are one-time turn devices, and once you turn it, you cannot turn it back. They don't go back. The gas company's got to come out and replace it. So turn that off when you're supposed to turn it off. The gas line at the street might have been what you were struggling to turn off. That's good to know where it is. It's another fail-safe system. It's what utility workers would use to shut off if they were putting in a new stove or something in your house. But yeah, shut off your gas if you're supposed to shut off your gas. Look at those guidelines. Don't assume you should have to.
To the earthquake, because that was actually my question, because in shutting off the main line, and you're saying check the list, but because they have to come in, the DWP or the gas company, when you shut it off with the wrench. With the earthquake, I accidentally seem to hit it when I'm raking leaves or whatever, and my rake hits and shuts it off. I called the gas company. The guy came and he said, I'm going to show you how to do it. You could technically do this yourself. You look in, and if it's red, it's off. If it's green, it's on. Turn it back on. It's just a screw with a screwdriver, clockwise 1/4 of a turn. During the recent fires, and I was raking leaves, I hit the thing, realized the gas was off. It was off, but I turned it back on just by turning. At least that was my experience.
It's technically possible. I think you can tell by the trepidation of that gentleman to tell you and him saying you can technically do this. Like you're not supposed to. Or the gas company's supposed to be handling that.
But Jay, I know you're gonna hate. I'm gonna say this, but I hit mine all the time. My little red. It's in such an inconvenient location, and I call my plumber, who said you could turn it on yourself. You need a microscopic screwdriver, which I have, and you just turn it, because it's happened to me like 6 or 7 times, and each time I think there's like a major problem in my house. And then I'm like, oh no, it's the little red earthquake thingy. So I know you.
That's absolutely true. Jay Bologna did not tell you to turn your own gas back on.
The gas company, the guy from the gas company said, turn it back on.
Hold on, Deanne, do you have a question related to this? Because if not, I think we're going to end today. But do you want to, Deanne, say one thing? Yeah, thank you.
Sorry. Just in the go bag, I would put some fireproof gloves, Just from some training that I had, I always throw crash axe in as well, just in case you can't get out or you need to clear something, getting out of your area, especially in your wooded area, or a tree falls down. They're just two items that I throw in as additional to what I've heard.
That's great advice. Yeah, sturdy leather gloves, and I keep a pair of boots with socks in them next to my bed to pull on if there's ever an event in the middle of the night too. So closed-toed shoes, sturdy socks, good leather gloves.
Hey,
That's-
folks,
yeah.
I think, I have no idea what time it is, but I'm pretty sure it's kind of late. And so I think we're going to wrap. I want to say thank you to everyone for coming, but I really want to say thank you to Jay and Lisa. Jay, who was an 11th hour ad, because I think I reached out 3
couple
days
days ago, yeah.
But Lisa, who strategized about this in the first place. And is Jane still here? I can't see. Jane, who, if you know her in the community, does so much for everyone. Thank you, Jane. And of course, Wayne, on the leadership team of the church here. You do so much too. Thank you for allowing us to use the space. If we're still live streaming, thank you everyone for coming. Danny, thank you for everything you do on the Rios chain. Michael as well. Jane and Megan manage the other chain, and so I'm sure I'm leaving people
And
out.
Leslie. And let's all thank Leslie. This wouldn't have happened without you.
And then Adelaide.
Yay! Thank you, Leslie.
Adelaide, who put like 100 and something flyers and mailboxes on her walks the past 3 days. So thank you, everyone. Lots of information. Good luck to all of us. We didn't mean to scare anyone today. We just meant to provide a deluge of information, and hopefully the vast majority of it you find useful. So
And
thanks.
then my contact info
Yes.
is up there as well, my email address, if anyone wants to continue this conversation or ask me any other questions or anything like that. Happy to help more in the future. And also, I guess one other closing thought too. I mentioned earlier that you all should be proud of where your neighborhood is, but that doesn't mean that there's not still more to do. I hope that this is the first of many meetings like this that you all have, be they in person or just virtual presences through that Google Drive and those text chains. This work is meant to be ongoing. It's meant to just be part of life. So I hope you guys continue to kind of keep this energy going and making your neighborhood safer. So thank you. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.